What's up, everybody? Welcome to Make Things Tiny. My name is Mick. You've seen those eye-catching luxury shipping containers here on YouTube, but are they actually a smarter option compared to a traditional tiny house on wheels? That's the question we're tackling today. Today we're going to hear from Tony. Tony is the founder of Alternative Living Spaces, a luxury shipping container company based out of Nevada. Tony's going to walk us through those key benefits of choosing a shipping container over a tiny house, and the reasons might surprise you. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, and let's jump into it. Let's find out why a shipping container might be a better option than a traditional tiny house on wheels. All right, I'm here today with Tony. Tony, thank you so much for being back on the channel. Tony is the founder of Alternative Living Spaces. I'm super excited for people to just get to learn more about you and learn about shipping containers, container homes. If you don't mind, for the people that didn't see your first interview on the channel, just talking a little bit about what got you into this space, and then we can go into some of the other questions.
Yeah, that sounds great. And thanks for having me on, Mick. It's great to be back. So my name's Tony Lopez, based in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I started my business is Alternative Living Spaces. Started it back in 2016 and really have been focused on shipping container construction. So we've done all kinds of different creative and unique type of container conversions. Our main thing that we do is tiny homes. So converting, 20 foot and usually 40-foot containers into either kind of short-term living spaces or long-term, even full-time type living spaces. We also kind of expand outside of that a little bit and do container gyms, container offices. We're doing a container kitchen, just finished a container bar. So containers are just like it's a box. You can kind of turn it into anything. And so that's the world that we're in. And then we do also dabble in some other kind of like alternative construction. We do some A-frames. And then we're starting a project in Vegas. It's we call it micro multifamily. So it's really tiny, 300 square foot, little rentable spaces that we'll be doing downtown. So
That's cool. And I know that y'all do the container pool, because I remember seeing that too.
right.
So yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do with containers, which I think is really great. It's a very creative sort of space that you're in. So one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is just whether or not, and in what way, like tiny homes, people need to sort of like shift away from kind of like the traditional tiny home, because a lot of people are sort of frustrated with the rising costs. I'm wondering, in your opinion, what are some of the benefits to potentially using, like, going the shipping container route versus like a traditional tiny house on wheels?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, I guess the way I got into doing container homes is that it just seemed like it was already a structure, like it's already there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when I first started getting into this, I didn't have a construction background. So for me, building a tiny home would have felt maybe too hard, or it's like, okay, not that it necessarily is, but just like my perception at that time, framing something up, finishing it out, like there's just a lot of maybe unknowns. Or one of the cool things about, and I stumbled into using containers, but was the reality of like, hey, there's already a structure in place. It's extremely
Right.
strong. The walls are already done. The exterior is already finished. Of course, you want to add windows and doors and things like that. And there's, right ways that you can do that. But I think that's one of the things that we already have going for us. Like if you were to talk to someone here in the US and say, hey, I need to have you make a solid steel box for me that's 20 foot, by 8 foot by 9'6" tall. I want it to have operating doors. Like you hire a welder to do this, man, it's going to cost you over $10,000. But, we are able to leverage the fact that, hey, this was manufactured overseas. It's now been imported right here into the US. It served a purpose, transporting something, but now maybe there's a surplus or an overage that we're able to buy them, at, in a lot of ways, way below the actual retail price that it should be. So I think that's like something that already is making container homes a little bit more affordable. So you're
Mm-hmm.
getting this structure that's already, structurally super sound, especially for people that are in areas where there could be like natural disasters and things like that.
Right.
It's probably hard to find a home that could be more durable or more safe than a shipping container that's converted into a home. And so, yeah, there's certainly some cost-effective ways that you can build them out. And like tiny homes, of course, square footage is probably the single biggest thing, the biggest driver
Mm-hmm.
of price. With containers, we do units that are both on the ground and on wheels. And so there's different clients in different areas where maybe you don't need it to be on wheels and you're in an area where you can put a container home on the ground. We can explore that option. Then on the other side, obviously the whole tiny house movement, with units being on wheels, with movable tiny homes and all the codes that are starting to allow for those now, obviously so many benefits being classified as an RV. And so we also are able to have trailers that are made for the containers, and then we just mount them directly to the trailers, technically making them an RV, and we get them certified and all that, so they're a movable tiny home at that point.
Okay. I never thought about it that way with the a couple things that you touched on, the durability side of it. That is huge because a lot of people are sort of concerned about the potential for tiny homes to sort of weather storms or, what you're talking about with natural disasters, just the how long do they hold up sort of thing. So that's a huge selling point. And then also the fact that the structure already exists, that is a good point. You are saving on that part because you don't have someone building the entire, because metal framing is something that's happening, with tiny homes, right? More and more homes are being built with the metal framing, but that comes at a cost too. Sort of like building
Yeah.
it from the ground up. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that you can put a shipping container on wheels and have it be on a trailer, and it'll just look like anything else that you would see in a like in a tiny house community or something like that. But yeah, I think the durability piece, that's what's sticking with me from what you said. And yeah, I didn't really think about that. Like it already exists, so you are saving money there. You don't have to have anyone build it up from scratch. And I did not know you can get them certified too. I didn't know they were certified. That's a
Oh,
huge plus. So I'm learning a lot today. But I think that's those are all really really interesting points to make. um, I will say though that I've seen some of your shipping containers on your website and different videos and stuff, and like I would say that yours definitely have more of like a luxury sort of aesthetic to them, on the interior and even some of the things, with the exterior. How do you balance the luxury design part with the affordability in your particular models? Before we get into how Tony balances luxury designs and high-end builds with affordability, I want to take a minute and thank the sponsor for today's video, Tiny Homes Village. Tiny Homes Village is a tiny house community located in Rock Island, Tennessee, outside Nashville, but near everything that you need, like hospitals, dining, and restaurants. They have a peaceful community with lots that are ready to go with full hookups and a brand new rent to own program that is designed to save you money on those upfront costs when you're going tiny. And in keeping with affordability and saving you money, they've got an exclusive offer for Make Things Tiny viewers and subscribers. They're offering 50% off the community entry fee, but you have to sign up by the end of September. So make sure you go to makethingstiny.com/tinyhomesvillage to learn more, or you can reach out to them directly. Just make sure you mention Make Things Tiny when you do so that you get that discount. All right, let's get back into the video.
yeah, it's a great question too. So I feel like with containers, there still is misconceptions about pricing. I
Mm-hmm.
still have a lot of conversations with people where maybe comparatively speaking, a container home is affordable when you're comparing it to maybe all other options that are out there.
Right.
But for whatever reason, there is a stigma that, hey, it's a container, therefore it's just going to be super cheap. But the reality is, you know, there is a way to get a container home built for super cheap, but there is that price versus quality spectrum. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the units that we're building, we definitely are going to lean towards quality. And for us, quality doesn't have to mean luxury, but it just means that, hey, this is built right. It has the proper insulation. You're not going to have any leaking. You're not just living in a box with no windows. There's certain things that are important. And one of the most important things is just the insulation. With
Mm-hmm.
containers, one of the things that is sometimes people are unaware of is, this is a metal box. And so when you put it in an environment that is very humid or an environment where there's going to be big fluctuations in temperature, there's actually something called container rain where moisture can develop on the inside of the container.
Oh,
So if
okay.
you don't have it properly insulated and you just use like the cheapest form of insulation, which would be like just a bat insulation, you run the risk of having issues with mold, condensation developing behind the walls. So one of the investments you usually will want to make when you're building a container home or building your container home is in a higher grade of insulation. So, most common is going to be closed cell spray foam. And then you usually want to do it at like a 3-inch thickness, which at that point it becomes a vapor barrier. So then you don't have any issues. So I say that to just say, there's ways that you can really bootstrap a container build. You can even DIY it. I did my very first container as a DIY build. Didn't know what I was doing. I used the wrong insulation. It looked beautiful. I mean, it looked luxury for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my all-in cost, it might sound crazy, but was 13,000. and it was honestly a beautiful unit. Now, I did all the labor, and all the labor
Right.
building it out. Um, and I'd say that unit, if you go to a builder, it's probably 50,000, right? And of course, this was in 2016, so prices have gone up. So there's ways you can DIY stuff, and really save money. But if you're going to go with a builder and you're looking to do, something that's quality, and I say quality because, you're making an investment, and you don't want this to be something that in 10 years, you're having issues with it. Like, you could be cheap on the front end, but it's not going to make sense long term. If
Right.
you build it right on the front end, this thing will last you 100 years. There's no reason why it can't last 100 years if it's properly maintained. You know, um, yeah, and the insides are built very much like a traditional home. So we'll do, traditional framing on the interior of the container, spray foam insulation, and then most of our units will have drywall or shiplap for interior finishes.
Okay. I think that's helpful for people to know just sort of like why there might be a cost difference between what they think a shipping container might cost versus the reality. But even still, what you're talking about, it would still be a lot cheaper than paying like $130,000 or $150,000 for a brand new, tiny house on wheels
Mhm.
potentially too. You touched a little bit on misconceptions. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what are some of the main misconceptions you see, or you think of people sort of like in terms of their perception of what a shipping container home is versus the reality.
Yeah, sure. I think there's like probably a few that come to mind initially. I'd say one of them, um, You know, so I will say there's two that have to do kind of with like safety. Some people will say, um, one of them is toxicity with containers. They'll say, hey, well, what if a shipping container had a bunch of toxic goods in it? Or, there's these kind of thoughts online that like if you're going to be inside of a container, the floors were sprayed with a bunch of pesticides and now you're going to get sick. And so I think that is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a misconception, but I'd say like it's a half truth. If you're selecting the right type of containers, you will not have those issues. And so, right type of containers means, most of the containers that we get are one trip containers. That just means they've been shipped one time from overseas here to the US. And they're just shipping traditional dry goods. So, there's nothing
Okay.
crazy that's being shipped in them. Usually, if a container was shipping something toxic, they have to actually put a label on the container. So, even when you get the container, you'd see this big label that is, basically informing you that, hey, there was something toxic shipped inside. And then the flooring does get sprayed with a pesticide because they were trying to prevent, rodents and things from getting in the containers
Hmm.
to, eat stuff and all that. So, but the reality is, if you do your homework right, most of the pesticides that are used are actually only toxic to someone if they ingest the wood that the pesticide was sprayed on. So with containers, no one's really ingesting wood, right? We're just putting flooring over the top of it. So there's not actually any issues with, I'd say, like the health of the container. So I think those are a couple misconceptions that are out there that if you do it the right way, you avoid any of those challenges. And yeah, I guess I'm kind of blanking. There was a few more that came to my mind, but they're kind of slipping my mind at the moment.
Oh, you're okay. No, I think I would never really think about the safety like piece of it, what it's been through before, but I think that sort of speaks to the value in going to an actual builder. So it would be beneficial for people to reach out to you and get the container home through you because they don't have to worry about all that. Like you've already done the process of sort of making sure the container is like up to where it needs to be so that people can live in it. And I think in general, you've covered a lot of what I would consider people making sort of like a misconceptions on the price and the durability piece, and just whether or not it's going to be luxurious in by their standards. Can you talk a little bit about the design piece of it? Like, what does it take to take a shipping container from where it is when you first get it to some of the things that I've seen? Because like you can drywall it like in the interior and things like that too, from what I understand.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, you can get really creative on the inside and yeah, make it literally look like any traditional home that's out there. And I remembered the one other misconception that I think it's worth mentioning really quick. It is I hear this all the time, and to some degree it does totally make sense. But it's this idea of like, well, living in a container, like, isn't it just a hot box? Like, it literally is a steel box. It's a conductor of heat, and then you're trying to go inside there and live. Like, how is that going to work out? And the reality is, as long as it's just properly insulated, there is no problem. So we've done, close to 200 units. And as long as you're doing an R value of, I'd say like R14 to R21 in the walls, um, and even like R14 to R30 in the ceilings, which is just using the right insulation, like you're going to be perfectly fine. And if you're in a really cold climate, you can also insulate the underside of the container just with some spray foam. And yeah, we've had clients all over the U.S., New York to Hawaii, cold climates, hot climates. I'm in Vegas, super hot climate, and yeah, it totally is not an issue if it's properly insulated. But yeah, in terms of what you're saying with building and design and all of that,
Mhm.
so a little bit of like kind of like the process for how to uh, how it kind of works with containers. Step one is structural, and so that's where we're typically doing our cutouts for all of the doors and all of the windows. And it's important that those are reinforced properly. And so we work with engineers that'll kind of tell us, hey, if the opening's this large, these are the type of reinforcements that you need to put in those areas. And so that's really kind of the basics. Like, hey, get a welder involved, start cutting out your holes for your windows and doors, reinforce them. And then from there, the rest of the construction process is a little bit more like traditional construction. So you can do metal studs or wood studs on the inside. There's also another product called InsoFast, which is just like an insulated corrugated panel that can be adhere to the container walls. And so that can function as kind of like your insulation and your framing. Then we'll do all of our roughing, put in all of our electrical, plumbing, HVAC lines, in some occasions, fire sprinkler lines, and insulate it. And then from there, we do all kinds of wall finishes. We've done plywood interior walls, drywall, shiplap, wood shiplap, MDF shiplap. Just kind of depends what the client wants. And yeah, kind of a basic build out from there. In terms of design, though, I'll say that one of the most important things that you can do with containers, because it is a more narrow footprint, containers are 8 feet wide. And then after you frame them out, insulate them, and finish them, they're closer to 7 feet on the interior, which is a smaller interior width than most traditional homes, of course. So I like to encourage people to put as much or kind of as many windows or large glass kind of openings as they can in the container. So I'm a big fan of large sliding glass doors in the containers. We do glass roll up garage doors in containers, having large picture windows. All of those are like actually so important in a container home because it's just going to open up that space. Like it's going to allow natural light in, it's going to allow the outdoors in, and it's going to help make it not feel like a shoebox, right? Because I've seen some containers where it's literally like one little window and I'm like, "Ooh, this is just dark.
Oh,
It just doesn't feel
oh
good,
no.
honestly." So yeah, you want to have as many windows and maybe as many doors as you can to open it up.
Okay. Yeah, I think I like that you mentioned the width because I do think that people sometimes don't think about just in any of the builds, even with tiny homes. I've had people talk to me about design and they forget that whatever the thickness of the walls is, you have to take that away from like your floor space when you're thinking about the width of your home. But I think the good thing with container homes, like you're saying, like there are so many ways to make them feel more like open, and you can do a tons of different things with them, like custom things. You can stack to
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that you can do with them, but yeah, I think the heat side of things is a huge misconception. Like that, you're gonna have an HVAC system, like you'll be okay, like that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that those are all really important things for people to know. The one thing I will say, this is my last question for you, is this industry is changing a lot, right? The tiny house industry, has changed so much from even the past few years, definitely since like 2020. What do you see as sort of the future of container homes, over the next, 3 to 5 years?
That's a really good question. You know, I'm really happy with the overall progression of the tiny house movement as a whole. I would
Hmm.
say that I am personally not married to just containers, and so I definitely am someone that's like pro tiny homes in general. But I will say, I guess with containers, some of the cool updates are that International Building Code is now recognizing shipping containers as a form of construction. So several years ago, that wasn't on the table. So now when you reach out to a local building department or zoning department, whereas 5 years ago it would kind of be almost scoffed at. Like I'd call
Hmm.
these building departments and be like, "Hey, I have a client. We want to add a container home to their property," and it was like saying a curse word. You don't tell them that. Like you use other terms. Don't say container because they're thinking like rundown manufactured home look or I don't know things like that. And so now, thankfully, there's been a lot of publicity online about containers. Everyone's seen
Mhm.
cool container homes at this point on TV and on Instagram. And so now when you have conversations with people, it's like they realize a container does not mean like a beat up container that's super cheap. Like
Right.
now when you have conversations with building departments, like they're kind of excited. They're like, "Oh, that's awesome. That's cool. You guys want to do a container." And they understand that like, yeah, you can do that as long as you just meet the proper building codes. So I think that's been exciting. It's something that can be a viable option. And then I think with a lot of the progress that's taking place in the tiny home movement as a whole, where ADUs are more prominent in major cities right now, even tiny homes on wheels being more legalized. I think containers are a type of product that fit into those categories as well. And so we work with a lot of clients and we do container ADUs or container tiny homes on wheels. So it feels like a great industry to be in. I think the tiny home industry as a whole, to me, feels like it's growing and that there's a lot more opportunity, especially than there was 10 years ago. And
Oh yeah, for
so,
sure.
yeah, I like the direction that we're going in. I think in 5 years, it's only gonna be better. Obviously, that we were talking even beforehand about the cost of living, right? And
Right.
it's and
Yeah.
it's insane. Over the last 5 years, everything's doubled, and so more than ever, there's a need for small housing, affordable housing, and just kind of like general alternatives to the traditional route that is becoming a little bit more unattainable, maybe for like a starter home.
hmm Yeah, no, I agree. I think that there's a lot of potential with container homes and tiny homes in general, and the tiny house movement. Of course, like I think it's the industry is going to continue to grow. I think it'll probably be more tiered than what it was in the beginning, where you have like the different levels of like the high end luxury versus the middle of the road, and then maybe more like affordable things and like you're saying bootstraps and DIY. But I think there's definitely more potential now for container homes to sort of be seen as more norm in this space, with tiny homes on wheels and like people, like more people sort of gravitating towards container homes and putting them on wheels and getting creative with the design and just sort of driving their overall some of their costs down. I think is a good opportunity for people. So yeah, I definitely see there more potential for container homes in this space, as opposed to the way it is now. It feels separate still a little bit, like in people's mind,
Mhm.
like you think a tiny house and then a container home or a shipping container, but I think there'll be more room for people to sort of like put the two together and just think like small living in general. Like these are my
Yeah.
options if I want to go smaller. So yeah, I think that's a really great point about the future, which is I'm assuming is going to happen super quickly because everything's moving
Yeah.
so fast. So it'll be
It's
like
wild.
that, and then we'll be in 3 or 5 years time, talking about these things again. But yeah.
It's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah, things are moving so quick, and it is cool. Like on that note, with yeah, people approving stuff. Like we've like, even in Vegas with containers, there's a it's called Container Park, but it's like over 80 containers combined, like a commercial retail center. In Salt Lake
Oh,
City, they just did a big apartment complex with 83 containers. So yeah, you're seeing more people using them. So it's it's
cool.
it's getting out there.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. That's awesome. It's a lot of containers. That's
Yeah,
cool though. I'm glad
it's
that
a
I'm
lot.
glad that it's catching on. I remember
Yeah,
seeing like container homes, like some of the big ones on YouTube, and there's so many cool things that people are doing with like their Airbnbs and seeing the stuff that you all have done on your YouTube channel and the different builds that you have available too. Like it's definitely not at all what people first think of when they think of a shipping container in a good way. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I appreciate you just taking the time to chat with me. It's always great to have you on the channel and have these conversations. And hopefully, people reach out. Links to your website and social media, so they can reach out and learn more about what you're doing, and hopefully, learn more about shipping containers and get excited about putting one on a trailer on wheels and then going and living somewhere with it.
I love it. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. It's always awesome to connect, and it's always fun talking containers. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, awesome, cool. Talk soon.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Tony. All right, that was my conversation with Tony. I appreciate Tony for taking the time to walk us through some of the benefits of choosing a shipping container, the questions around durability and sustainability that they answered, misconceptions as well too, and then ultimately why the price is what it is and how that can be competitive compared to a traditional tiny house on wheels. The good news is that Tony's company, Alternative Living Spaces, is also a preferred builder with Tiny Homes Village in Rock Island, Tennessee, which is a sponsor for today's video. So if you're interested in moving to Tiny Homes Village, you can also potentially get a shipping container with Tony. So make sure you reach out to Tony, ask questions, links to everything that Tony's doing in the video description. Thank you so much, Tony, for taking the time to chat with us. Also, you can go to makethingstiny.com/tinyhomesvillage if you're interested in potentially moving to the tiny house community there too. And if you haven't seen my first video with Tony, you can check it out here. And don't forget to make tiny. I'll see you guys in the next one.